Thanks for tuning into the first episode of Padres Corner. I'm your host, Lincoln Zadunich. Let's get into it. Tough for the Pods as they drop the rubber match to the New York Mets before heading back home to face the Minnesota Twins on Friday. Thankfully, the guys get a much needed off day, so hopefully that should help them against Minnesota. The Padres are finally back at home after what's felt like a very long road trip. Hopefully, being home in the friendly confines of Petco Park will help the boys, but it was a very winnable series in New York. The Padres had plenty of opportunities to win game one after some bad sends to home plate and 4 outs made at home. It was just a struggle to get out of it in that 2-1 loss after Noel McLean settled in for 6 innings of ball. And then game two was the Fernando Tatis Jr. show. He put on a clinic in home run prevention and creation. He hit 2 homers and then took one back, a grand slam from Francisco Lindor that would have been the difference maker had it been made. So it was a fantastic game from the superstar right fielder. And then finally, in game three, the Padres really struggled to put runs across the board, and Jeremiah Estrada's 2 runs allowed in the 8th inning proved pretty crucial after the Padres hit what would have been the tying single on a Gavin Sheets pinch hit single. So unfortunately, the boys do get the series loss for the first time since they were in Atlanta. It is a stinker, but is it time to hit the panic button? Is it time to worry? Absolutely not. The boys are doing just fine. There are 0 worries about the Padres. Their hitting still looks good. It's definitely regressed just a little bit lately, which is to be expected. There are ebbs and flows in baseball. It is a sport that has that level of cadence to it. There's not always going to be riding high like we were against the Brewers, like we were against all these other teams prior to this. There are going to be lower moments. It's about how we come out of that. And so coming out of that with a series win, with a series opening win against the Twins, and then against the Pirates after that is going to be really crucial in this next stretch of games. Looking ahead, got a lot of fun stuff on the docket for today. Let's get into it. First up, is AJ Preller just an absolute merchant at finding value picks? It seems kind of odd to think about, but between Ty France, Miguel Andujar, Samad Taylor, Austin Hayes, Luis Rengifo, it seems like Preller knows just how to exact the last bit of baseball out of somebody. I don't know how he does it. I'm sure it's probably a lot of luck. Love to ask him about it. But it reminds me of that scene in Moneyball where Billy Beane, as Brad Pitt, says to David Justice, I want to milk the last ounce of baseball out of you. It's how that feels with some of the players the Padres have had on their roster and some of their contributors. I mean, look at Nick Castellanos. This is a guy who's hitting, I think, 174 throughout the season, but hit some pretty clutch home runs, some pretty clutch hits for the Padres that actively won them games. I remember specifically that Cardinals game where we're against Riley O'Brien, who had the longest active homerless streak in baseball at the time. And Nick Castellanos, who was washed up at the time, to be super frank, had an absolute moonshot against him. 2 runs to put us into the 10th inning and eventually win the game on a Manny Machado sac fly. And so I think moments like that, moments like Samad Taylor being a spark plug for this offense, moments like now what Luis Rengifo is doing with the Padres after I think he was released by the Brewers before coming to us, is wonderful to see. Seeing guys like Jace Bowen who are really starting to kind of come into their own, even though they've had some rough seasons. Like, that's really fascinating to me. And what's interesting about that is that Samad Taylor is going to be back soon. He just started his rehab assignment, I believe today. It's possible it's tomorrow. But he's just starting that. When he comes back, it's interesting to see who they're going to send down. It seems like it's between Sungmin Song and Jace Bowen, but I'm leaning a little more towards Song. I feel like Song has kind of been trying to be too aggressive lately. It seems like a mental reset might be good for him. Whereas Bowen, like I said, is starting to really come into his own. He had that homer. He's great on defense. Song has been pushing it a little too much, and it seems like AAA might be a good place for him to be for a bit. But I don't know. What do you guys think? What's fascinating to me is that guys like this can really turn things around for their seasons, just as the Padres. I mean, Ty France has had maybe the best season of his career this year in San Diego, between what can only be described as gold glove defense at first base in the NL. I don't know who's doing better than him at covering the cold corner and the Padres are lucky to have him on a year-long contract. I think he's actually going to be maybe not one of the most sought-after free agents, but definitely the most sought-after free agent. His position in this upcoming free agency listing, I would love for the Padres to be able to keep him. I don't know that we'll be able to. I think we'll probably be searching for something else at first base, or Gavin Sheets will just step back into that role. I think he did fine before Ty France kind of really started surging. But it's fascinating to see France really come into his role. He's hitting close to 300, if not over it. He's hitting bombs left and right. I know he's kind of slowed down a little bit lately, same with Manny and Sheets, but when he was going, he was going. This whole offense was fantastic. They were surging. They were looking great. And it's fantastic to see a kid from San Diego kind of come back after leaving for a while and really come into his own. I think it's fantastic to watch. And even beyond that, you got a guy like Luis Rengifo, who had not hit a homer this whole season and has hit 4 in the last month with the Padres. Like, I don't understand where that kind of power really comes from, because he seemed to have lost it a bit, but he's really turned things around. And I mean, speaking of power, and this moves away from where we were at, but speaking of power, Fernando Tatis Jr. is very close to having a 20 homer season. I can't remember exactly what it was. I think he just hit his 15th, I'm pretty sure, in his 2-homer game on Tuesday night. But he is 5 homers away from a 20 homer season. That's not all that unattainable for a guy who's hit like 10 since the trade deadline. It's pretty incredible what he's been doing. And he's really surged back to that star player that San Diego fans have come to know and love, because he was really struggling. 200 at bats without a home run was a really long time. He's now hit 3 of the farthest home runs this season. He's definitely hit the longest with that 474 footer. It is incredible to see that level of turnaround after so many struggles to begin the year, because there was a time where I was really worried about him and that he really wouldn't find that pace until next season. And he's cemented himself as, okay, now I'm back to that contact hitter and power hitter. And he's really turning back into that Hall of Famer we've come to know and love from Fernando. And not only that, but his defense is phenomenal. I mean, the fact that Fernando ever played second base for the Padres for even a second is ridiculous to me. I think it's fantastic that he's finally back at his own position. He's finally back feeling himself. I mean, I don't think 1 out of 100 times maybe someone else makes that catch in right field that he made Tuesday night against the Mets. But I think that no one else can do the kinds of things he does. He stays healthy. He stays available for the Padres. I think he's maybe the most important asset the Padres have next to Manny Machado and Jackson Merrill. And the fact that he's still only, I think, 27 is ridiculous to me. The Padres have him for so long. He could be a San Diego Padre for the rest of his career. I think he has nowhere to go but up. His ceiling, his potential are incredible. He's truly a 5-tool player in every regard for the term. I think that the Padres really landed a bargain in trading for him with the White Sox all those years ago, and Preller should be lauded for that. I think that AJ Preller, when he knows who he wants and who he wants to keep, he keeps him. He held on to Merrill. He held on to Toddy. I know that he trades away guys like James Wood and guys like CJ Abrams and Max Fried and Mackenzie Gore and others like that. I understand, and I know that that's hard to kind of take in, but the truth about baseball is that you have to give a lot to get a lot. And we saw that at the trade deadline. And the trade deadline, I think this year actually was a really great reminder of what AJ Preller does best as a GM, is that he wheels and deals and he buys when he can, because I think it was a great trade deadline for the Padres. I really thought it was a good decision to buy just 2 games out of a wild card spot, and to trust the guys the way in which he did really seems to have turned out well now that the Padres are holding on to that last wild card spot. I think that the deals the Padres made were the right deals. This offense has the capabilities to get where they want to be. They have the capabilities to take them to the Fall Classic, to their first World Series since 1998. I really believe that. I think getting hot at the right time is so important. I think that they definitely still have the possibility to be a 24-inning scoreless streak like they were in 2024. I think that something like that, it could happen again. It could happen again like in the Cubs series where they didn't score more than 3 runs in a single game. I think they only scored 6 runs the entire series. And that That would stink. I really think it would. It would be the worst. But I do think that this team has the capability to do something like the Texas Rangers did in 2023 or the Atlanta Braves in 2021, where they really just got hot at the right time. And that's kind of all that matters with the postseason, because the postseason is truly such a crapshoot that it's really impossible to kind of quantify, oh, well, these teams are more set up than others. Like, the postseason is such a level playing field where any team any day can win. You look at a team like the Boston Red Sox in 2004, who had been kind of written off halfway through the season, and they came back, stormed back, basically fought their way to a wild card positioning to the playoff spot, and didn't even win the division after the Yankees. And they went down 0-3 to the juggernaut Yankee team in the ALCS, and ended up being in a historic comeback that had never happened before, winning the next 4 games and the series, and ended up just destroying the Cardinals in the World Series. And I do truly think that this Padres team is special and can do something like that. And I think that at the beginning of the season, if you had asked me that, I would have said, no, you're crazy. You're insane. This team doesn't really have that. They don't seem to have that level of capability. But it really feels like they've started to come into their own, like they've started to remember who they are from this past 2 seasons, from 24 and 25, that special kind of magic quality that made us really fall in love with them. I mean, like I said, at the trade deadline, the Padres made some great moves. The move for Casey Mize was fantastic. The move for Robbie Ray was fantastic. I think both of those trades did a really good job in adding to the Padres starting rotation, and they really needed it. I think having a guy like Joe Musgrove come back and he slots into the 5 spot is huge. Having a guy like Nick Pivetta come back and he slots into the 4 spot or even the 5 spot, because now the Padres have a wealth of arms in a potential playoff rotation where they have Michael King, they have Robbie Ray, Casey Mize, Walker Buehler, Randy Vasquez. You've even got a guy like Lucas Giolito coming back off the IL. You've even got a guy like Griffin Canning to fill out some bulk innings, though probably shouldn't because he wasn't that good. I think Griffin Canning could probably get released. I don't think he's given the Padres enough value, to be super honest. I think that he's struggled more than he's done well. I think Randy Vasquez deserves the benefit of the doubt. He had an otherworldly start to the season and has regressed a lot since then. And I think it's okay to kind of give him a little benefit of the doubt with those struggles, especially as a guy who's been a Padre now for the last 2. I think this is his 3rd year with us since getting traded over in 24 with Michael King and Drew Thorpe and all them. I do think that he deserves a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt, but Mize and Ray have been fantastic in their starts. I know both of them kind of struggled in their debuts, but since then, I mean, Ray did fantastic in his start on Tuesday. He really settled in after kind of struggling at first. Ended up pitching, I think, 6 innings of 1-run ball. Looked great the whole time, to be honest with you. Even he works through trouble well. I think that's something that's super important, especially in a playoff series, is finding ways to work through trouble and still limit the runs. I think that Mize is fantastic. I know he had his worst start of his career in that first start with the Padres, but he's fantastic. He was one of the best starters in the American League before he came over to us. And I think the way his mind works, his work ethic, hearing Stammen talk about how he works as a pitcher is all the things you want to hear. And so having guys like Pivetta come back from the injured list and be able to work through things, and having guys like Musgrove come back as well, I do think it's fantastic to hear that Joe Musgrove, throwing harder than he's ever thrown before, reportedly. His pitching starts in rehab in El Paso have apparently been fantastic. I think that's a great thing to hear for Padres fans, that it's just such fantastic news, not only to hear that he's on the mend, he's coming back, but that he's really kind of coming back into his own as a pitcher, especially after having been away from the game for so long. I just think it's fantastic news. He's been gone for almost 2 years. He was supposed to be back at the beginning of the season and has just really started to come back a lot. And I think that's just great news to hear. Looking ahead to this next series with the Twins, I think it's going to be super important. Like I said, just getting a series win out the gate, hitting that series opener hard and getting a win, getting back in the win column, especially with the Diamondbacks won Wednesday night, the Phillies won Wednesday night, the Dodgers won Wednesday night. Like, it's important to really get back into it, because it feels like every game is a must-win game. And obviously, we're going to lose some. It's going to happen. It's okay. But at the end of the day, there's 3 playoff spots for us. We're probably not going to win the division, barring something insane happening to Los Angeles and something even crazier happening to the Padres. it's going to be really difficult to win the division. So I think shooting for a playoff spot is really where we're at right now. The Cubs seem to have it locked up. It's going to be really hard to keep PCA on the reins and try to take that spot. So it seems like these last two are up for grabs. It'd be great to get that fifth spot away from the Phillies, but they seem to kind of also be jousting for that. And so I think that looking for that final spot, fending off the Cardinals, fending off the Diamondbacks, fending off the Marlins, who are kind of starting to make a little bit of a comeback, is going to be super important in the next couple weeks to come. That series in September against the Diamondbacks hopefully will not loom large at that point, but it might. We never know. And hopefully that series with the Dodgers looms large as well. And maybe that might be a turning point back then. We could still be fighting for the pennant. It would be fantastic, like it has the last two seasons, for it to come down to that last week. But the way it's going right now, it feels like we're kind of at a deadlock at like 7-8 games back. Maybe we won't be then. It would be fantastic for that not to be the case. I know 2-3 weeks ago, it seemed like a huge throwaway thing of like, oh, they've got it again. They're going to win it again. And now that we're inching closer, it feels like, oh, maybe it's not so crazy for that to be the case. And so it's definitely more of a thought in the mind of Padres fans, and definitely in the mind of the front office themselves and the club, that, oh, we could catch these guys. We could do this. And baseball is such a game where anything can happen, truly. I mean, anything can happen. We saw last season the Guardians came back from a 15 and a half game deficit to the Tigers to eventually overtake them and win the AL Central in the final week of the season. And there are stories like that all the time that happen. And so I think that for the Padres to hope that maybe this is the year that they finally take the division crown away from the Dodgers isn't the most insane thing. But to see them in the playoffs, to play them in the playoffs, to beat them in the playoffs, and to advance to the World Series, I think is so much more important than any division crown could be. I would so much rather hang a World Series pennant and have a parade than win the division crown and then get there and do that. So I think that one is so much massively more important than the other. To trade one for the other is ridiculous, in my opinion. I think nothing is more important to San Diego than bringing that World Series trophy and winning the Fall Classic. And so that needs to be the number one priority for the Padres, and I'm sure it is. But the Friars have just got to keep going out there day in and day out and just remember, this is what we're fighting for. This is what we're grinding out. And it really seems like they've started to do that over the last couple of weeks, and really during the second half. I mean, this is a team that has been known for getting hot in the second half, especially these last two seasons under Mike Schill is when everything kind of clicked in that second half. It really came together. I remember the Padres in 24 were the best team in baseball in that second half. They were almost unstoppable throughout that period of time. I don't think they lost a series for the first like 10 series or so in that second half after the All-Star break. And so seeing that continue to be a sign of progress is great to see from this team. It's great to see that they're continuing to progress, they're continuing to get better and improve, and that team dynamic is really coming together now and gelling, because it felt for a while like, this feels a little shaky. This feels a little like, oh, maybe we might be selling at the trade deadline, and then storming back and being like, no, we're going to buy. We are buyers. We're going for it. We're in contention. We're never not going to be in contention. And I think that's all fantastic news. And not only that, but it makes the recent news that Kwanzaa Jones and Feliciano were approved as buyers officially by the MLB owners. They were approved as the new owners for the San Diego Padres. It makes that news so much more comforting, especially not only for the fans, but for the owners as well, that they're buying a contending team. They're spending, well, $3.9 billion, but they're spending a valuation of that. So they're not spending that total amount, but that's the valuation of the Padres. Spending that amount of money, hoping to get something a product that you're going to be able to put in the field and people are going to be able to enjoy watching. It's, I think, fantastic for the team not to immediately wave the white flag and say, oh yeah, no, we're going to sell at this deadline because we don't think we're going to make it. And so I think that hopefully Feliciano and Jones have enough money to give Preller after the $3.9 billion deal to play with. But I think that having an owner that's willing to spend, like Seidler was, hopefully having an owner that's willing to do that, paired with a guy like AJ Preller, who really seems to have a great ability to build a roster and find value, I think is going to be so fascinating to see how that pairs. And I think that for Padres fans, you really just hope that there's not going to be a lockout in 2027, because there's a lot of interesting things in the free agency market this coming year. You've got Scooble, you've got King possibly exiting, you've got Mize almost definitely exiting the Padres, but a lot of really potent bats like Randy Arozarena and others that could really be in play for the Padres for the first time in years, because it feels like the Padres have not been really dwelling in the free agency market for quite a long time. I know it hasn't been long, that long, since the Manny Machado deal and since deals like the Xander Bogaerts deal back in 2023. But it feels like the Padres have not dipped their toes into the water unless they were spending over $200 million, because those have been their major deals. And they haven't always aged well. I think that Machado's will continue to age pretty well. I know that at the beginning of the season, it was like, oh crap, this is not going to go well. But now that he's hit 24 bombs, he almost seems like he might be a lock for 30 this year. And I know his average has dipped down, his contact isn't as great, and he's not that great with RISP, and he strikes out. But I think that a guy who hits 24 bombs, you can't really fault him for that. I think the contact numbers going down is just going to happen as he ages, and that's going to have to be okay. But the power numbers staying where they are, I think, is fantastic. I think Bogarts' contract is going to continue to be a tough one for Padres fans. I don't think it's ever going to be great. I think they're going to continue to try to get out of it, and that stinks for me because I'm a guy who loves Xander Bogaerts. I think he's a great guy. He hustles day in, day out, and really tries to do his best for the team. I think he's an above average shortstop with a really good arm. I think his defensive metrics are pretty fantastic, and I really enjoy watching him play shortstop. For us, I don't know who else I'd rather have, especially with shortstop being such a premium position in terms of defense, but his bat just doesn't seem to be there. I think I'd like to see it be a little more than just league average. I'd like to see him turn in another great season at least one of these times, but it's just tough to keep watching him. I think the same thing about Jake Cronenworth after he had two really great years in 21 and 22. And since then, it's just dipped so heavily. And it's just kind of hard to watch at this point. It's just tough. But the defense always felt like it was 100% there. And it really hasn't been this year. And that's been really tough. But I think that overall, he still has a ways to provide value for this team. He still continues to come through time and again. And so that's really great to see. But seeing contributors like Gavin Sheets, Luis Rengifo, like Song, even every now and then, Bowen, Ty France, Austin Hayes, guys like that really come through. I mean, Luis Campusano, man, this was a guy who Padres fans were just hating on to begin the season. I mean, his nickname is literally the AAA merchant because he was not allowed out of AAA. And I don't know why Mike Schilt didn't seem to like bringing him up. He didn't give him a whole lot of opportunities to kind of take over the catching job, but he's been given plenty of opportunities this year and has shined. He's hitting over 300. I think he has 10, 11 home runs. I'm not totally sure, but he was injured for quite a while, so those numbers are a little more excusable. But he's been fantastic for the Padres this year. So much better than Freddie Fermin, who the Pods gave an arm and a leg for last year. And I think that it's just great to see the Padres have something like that that's so viable and such a great core to kind of build around in this coming time. I think that left field is going to be an interesting one to fill in this free agency. I think, like I said, Arozarena could really fill that position, but there's plenty of other guys who could certainly fill that for us. It'll be interesting to see how the Padres kind of handle that, kind of how all teams kind of handle that with the possibility of the lockout coming up. And so really hoping that there is no lockout, not only so that we don't miss games, but also so that free agency and the offseason kind of gets to have its normal progression of events. It seems unlikely that that'll be the case, but really hoping for that and hoping that the MLB owners and the MLBPA can kind of find a joint resolution sooner rather than later. Thanks for listening to this first episode of Padres Corner. Tune back in next time to hear more about the Friars. As always, let's go Pods.